I think that this is a really exciting time.
I don't know about you, but
For me, there has been a lot more uncertainty around everything in life over the course of the last few months. And that's really where this idea for a kind of talk came from, was recognizing that, we are all going through this. We've heard about how for many students, it's also an extremely uncertain time, not knowing what is going to be happening. And, sometimes uncertainty can be really uncomfortable and challenging to deal with. But we can also recognize that it does bring opportunities at times. And that's really the kind of space we wanted to explore today. I don't have any slides because I thought it would be useful to just chat with you a little bit about teaching and learning in this context. Because if you may or may not have been following it, but if you read the news, there has been a lot of talk about what is up with higher education, what's going on in terms of health and social care and the NHS. And, as much as some of that perhaps is helpful, sometimes the attention-grabbing headlines are, maybe more effective at inducing anxiety than they are actually helping to resolve questions for us. I know certainly for me, the experience of the last few months has been a bit of a shock because, I was trundling along with a sense of how the school year usually finishes and how we finish up our term at university. And there was a sudden transition to a completely different way of organizing, of connecting, of teaching. And you may have had an experience that similarly came to a sudden transition that you've had to adapt to. And I think it's really important for us to take a moment to have a bit of conversation around, like, what does that mean for us? And how can we think about that not as something that is filled with challenges, although it certainly is, but also something that is filled with certain bits of opportunity. And, how can we think about the way that those two relate to each other? So if you were in the meeting before we officially started, you would have heard some music playing in the background, which is music that I chose for a very specific reason. I'm not sure if it's familiar to any of you. You might have known some of the songs because some of them were covers of songs that are somewhat, well known. But what's really interesting to me about the album that those songs came from is sort of how it came together. So it's from an album that the jazz pianist Herbie Hancock released about a decade and a half ago called Possibilities. And alongside the album, he also made a film with colleagues that sort of records the story of how the album got put together. And he was really interested in the album because he realized that, like, when you're a musician, sometimes you get pigeonholed into reproducing whatever you were most famous for. Whatever your best record was, everyone that expects you to go and keep doing the same thing over and over again. But he really wanted to explore what it might be like to engage with different kinds of musicians from different genres. And he was interested in what he said. In the film, he talks about it as exploring the territory that could possibly develop with a collaboration with himself. And I think that was an interesting kind of question. Like, how is it that we might explore possibilities that are opening up for us today in terms of teaching and learning and education? Is there new territory that we might develop in collaboration with each other? That's not a kind of question that has a really clear answer at the moment, but I think it's really interesting because it really highlights that we're all going to be working together to make education in the future as we have in the past. And so I wanted to just share with you a few examples of what's been going on in the department in the last few months and how we are trying to collaborate to make sure that we make the most of this moment that we're in. So there are three things I just want to briefly touch upon in terms of different aspects of what's going on in our department. And those three things are teaching excellence and what it looks like perhaps today and into the future, diversity and inclusion, and prioritizing student experience. So in terms of teaching excellence, it's something that we are really dedicated to, but it's really tough right now because we can't say exactly what the autumn's going to look like. Some of you may have received a message this week from our Vice Chancellor, who was noting that we're preparing to open up campus, but we also are preparing to teach larger group sessions online if that's required, based on the public health advice and the government advice at the time. We certainly don't expect that teaching will be entirely online, but at the same point, we can't really guarantee what's going to be happening right now. And that is a bit challenging to not know. But I thought it would be useful to share with you a kind of anecdote related to something that's been going on in the department. Last week, we held one of our regular teaching forums. And so we have teaching forums, which are places for staff to gather together and really talk about teaching and what makes up excellent teaching and how we can all become better teachers. And this time, we had two different presenters who were focusing on aspects of digital learning and the different possibilities that are available because of that. One of them shared with us a range of really interesting projects that people have been doing, integrating new tools and platforms into different modules at the university. But the other presenter, who is Emma Fraser from our department, she sparked a really interesting discussion about how, in a way, good online teaching is not necessarily that different from good face-to-face teaching. Because if you look at it, what we've been doing at the university in the last number of years includes a large number of things that are online. We have a virtual learning environment for each module that we teach. And that's where students access a wide variety of things that support their learning. So in my courses, I often put up things like readings and worksheets, and I've put up short podcasts and videos as well. And these are all things that students have been accessing and interacting with for a number of years in the course of their teaching. In addition, a few years ago, we moved to online marking in the department. So all students submit their assignments electronically and then get feedback electronically. So that's something else that's already been online and digital. And certainly while we do, in the past, we've met with students in our offices, I know I've certainly had times where it's been much more effective to have an email exchange or to meet virtually online. And so there are lots of things that we've already been doing that are about providing excellent education using online and digital tools. And I think what's really exciting about is that in that teaching forum, we started talking about how we can make even more of that, how we can sort of bring it together with the kinds of platforms and digital interactions that you might be really familiar with and might be a part of your normal lives already. And I have to say, personally, I'm really excited about all this because I, in the last few months, have had a number of great interactions with students online, whether that's like chatting quickly about a final year student's worries about her dissertation as she was about to submit it and realizing that live chat online was much more effective at resolving her worries quicker than trying to schedule an in-person meeting. Or whether it's things like we've been working with some of our student ambassadors to try to record some of their experiences, put it up on YouTube, become part of the UniBuddy platform so that they can actually interact with people like you more directly and share their experience and insights, even if you don't meet face to face. So I think there's tons of interesting things that are going on. And I just really wanted to give you a picture of that. We have a new role of an online teaching champion in the department who's been sharing great resources with us. And we're going to continue to have these teaching forums where we talk about how we can make the most of what's probably going to be continually changing public health advice and advice around what will be the best for students in the autumn. So I think that this is a really exciting time. And one of the things that makes it exciting for me is that also we are building in diversity and inclusion into that. It's a central value of our department. We have a director on our leadership team who's focusing on equality, diversity, and inclusion. And we really want to make sure that we are thinking about that as we go through all of this planning and as we approach things like our Welcome Week that we have in the autumn to welcome all new students to our community and to campus. And so I think we're just going to continue working and finding ways that we can make sure the things we've already been doing can happen regardless of what situation we find ourselves in the autumn. So I think I can certainly say more about what we're doing in terms of equality, diversity, and inclusion if you're interested later. But I'll just quickly turn to the last point, which is prioritizing student experience. And we do really recognize that going to university is not just about getting a qualification, that there's all these other opportunities for meeting people, having new experiences, and learning about yourself that are central to what a university experience is as well. And I can certainly tell you that colleagues across the university are working hard to ensure that we don't lose those aspects, even if they end up being transformed in the coming months. So, in our department, for example, we're exploring with some colleagues the possibility of having a new messaging app that will allow us to respond to student questions and concerns in a different way that might be more appropriate or more comfortable for some students. We're also in talks about how we can make sure we take into account the diverse situations that students are going to find themselves in terms of, what access do you have to technology, to a good space to study, to being able to interact using these kinds of platforms. Do you have the skills to be able to help you do that? And we are really aware of all these questions and working to find ways that we can support all of our students through the next year. I also really want to say that in the department, we have an amazing group of student representatives. So every year we ask for volunteers of students who would like to represent their year group and their program in our departmental meetings and feeding into some of the work that we do to continually improve and revise our courses. Our student reps have been incredible in the last few months in really helping us to get some great ideas of what we can be doing and what's working well in our teaching. And we're going to continue that because I think it's just so central to what we do and to how we actually make sure that this is working for you. And that really links to the last thing that I wanted to say before I turn over to my colleagues, which is to share a quote from a blog post that our colleague from the social work team, Joanna Koska, posted a number of weeks ago on our staff chat area. And this is from a blog where the author, Kathy Davidson, writes about what is important for teachers as they approach designing modules for the autumn. And she says that the most important question that we should ask ourselves right now is, what do our students need? And what do I know that will be the most value to my students now? And I think those are really important questions. I don't profess to always know the answers, and that's why I find it so valuable to keep in touch with both current students and prospective students like yourselves as well, because I think it's really through conversation that we figure that out. Find the ways that we can make sure your opportunities for learning are really meeting with what you need and what's going to be valuable to you as you get your degree and then move on after it. So I think it's really important that we all keep doing that in these uncertain times, is reaching out, connecting with each other, and finding ways to work together to make the most of our experience together at the university and in learning. If you do have any questions, please get in touch by email or using any of those platforms, and we are really very happy to share our thoughts and answer your questions.